All righty, Wednesday, April 24th, quick session recap here, starting off with ES. So one of the things I had mentioned yesterday is that sellers really needed to show up. If you caught, this was from yesterday's session recap. So if you caught that session recap, this is what we were talking about. We were talking about the importance of this 5120 area for sellers to defend. We needed to see them defending that key area of resistance. Otherwise, price would most likely have a pretty explosive move here to retest that 5150 simply because there is a volume void through this 5120 up into 5150 area. Price always moves quickly through these volume voids, right? So 5120, kind of expecting sellers to, at the very least, attempt to defend this level. That is exactly what we saw today following 2 days of buying, both Monday and Tuesday. Good rallies on those days. So we have that initial rejection of the 5120 during essentially regular trading hours open right through here, right? And then price trades down into the key weekly pivot, which is that 5100 into 5090 area. That's that red shaded area right through here on the chart. And then down into the 5080 downside level of interest, which was a key area of support from last week. And so now the setup is quite interesting because sellers really needed to see a break of that 5080. Sellers really needed to see a break that 5080. So 5080 is going to be a significant watch for tomorrow, as well as the 5120. It's pretty much going to be the two main levels that I'm looking at for tomorrow's session on ES. Now, we do have GDP tomorrow morning, so I am expecting some volatility, some decent activity during that pre-market session. The challenging thing about this current setup is that we do have kind of an intermediate term context that is a downtrend that has shown now a change in character in the near term, meaning the most recent lower high of that intermediate term downtrend has been broken to the upside. And now we have a near term uptrend, right? So the question for tomorrow is whether buyers can continue to defend this potential higher low, or if sellers are going to, start really stepping in here, break the 5080, break this near term uptrend, and then continue that leg lower, in which case this should just be treated as a near term range, right? So a couple scenarios to keep in mind here to keep it easy. What I'll primarily be looking at, like I said, is how price trades versus that 5080 or that 5120. Those are going to be the two primary areas that I'm looking to focus on how price is trading and engage with price in those areas. So again, looking at that intraday action, you have that 5120 right through here, right? And then some decent scalps versus that prior day high. Session low right through here is that prior day high. So scalp prior day high into 5120, scalp prior day high into 5120. Ultimately, sellers take over, right? Really pushing fresh lows past 10 a.m. and then down into that weekly pivot down into the 5080. Now look at the action. You mark pretty much a lower high right through here, which aligns with that 78% intraday fib pretty nicely. Price comes back, tests that weekly pivot. Okay, and now just trading here into 5110, a bit of no man's land for me personally heading into tomorrow's GDP print. So we'll see what the overnight action looks like. Ideally, we have some action again versus 5120 or that 5080 into GDP, into that regular trading hours session for tomorrow. Here's another look at your near-term structure, right? So that's ES. Let's jump into NQ. ES, definitely the more favorable setup currently, just based on this structure that you can see there on the screen. Now NQ, similar. This morning in the pre-market prep live stream, if you're not in the think tank, you should be, but this morning what I was talking about is how price is trading up into this key pivot, right? So we have one test right here from last week, another test, it breaks, you got the retest right through there, now holds as resistance, another retest, now holds as resistance. And so it's like 6-7 tests in the series of 2 or 3 days. That is significant. We know this level is significant, at least in the near term. And remember, price has a memory. So when price revisits those areas, you're usually going to see them treated as some sort of pivot, or at the very least, some fight for price through that area. That's exactly what we see for today, right? With slight gap higher on the back of that Tesla earnings. You got the move into that 17,800 area. Now take a look at this. Once this chart rescales, we open the session with two essentially shooting star candles right into the key area of resistance. Now, looking at that, you see that it's a point blank short, right? It's a very obvious short. Got your signal bars there on the higher time frames at resistance. You want to be short. And if you don't like shorting or you're focused on trading longs, you do not want to be touching any longs until you start to see some action like this. Some true reversal action on those higher time frame charts, right? Right through here, you got your 30-minute doji and then a 30-minute hammer, and now you have two 30-minute green bars following that. So this gives you about an hour to look for that intraday lower time frame entry and capture some longs if that's your play. All right, so this is like, I just bring this up because this is the basis of all of my trading, looking at that higher time frame setup, what the structure shows, and then just drilling down onto that intraday, that lower time frame for some type of entry. This is, in my opinion, the most effective way to be trading the index, whether it be ES or NQ. Market structure is the king, identifying your higher highs, higher lows, things like that, ranges, and then working with horizontal levels, key levels of interest. And you can make a pretty nice living, but that is just an aside. As far as what we're looking at for tomorrow, going to be keeping a very similar approach to what we just discussed in ES. What I want to see is whether sellers are going to continue to defend this key pivot up through here. And if they cannot, if sellers fail to do so, you can expect a pretty quick move into last week's volume point of control, which is this yellow line right through here. And then if buyers continue to press up through there, we're talking about a retest of last week's resistance right through here, 17,950, and potentially 18K, which is the daily time frame breakdown point. All right, so a couple of scenarios to consider and keep in mind. As always, this is not, crystal ball or fortune telling or anything like that. It's just looking at what the structure currently shows us and then keeping an open mind about some potential scenarios that can unfold. Now, the challenging part about the current setup, again, like I mentioned with ES just a moment ago, we have this intermediate term downtrend. All right, that has at the very least shown a change in character to the upside here, with price trading up through that most recent lower high. Now the question is this near term uptrend that we kind of see here, like essentially does today's low mark a higher low? That's a question mark there. Or do sellers continue to press here, right? And so I expect the action through here between essentially today's low and today's high to be quite challenging. Now, these are typically the scenarios where I lean off the keys. I do less. I wait for the higher time frame setup to really become more clear. And that's kind of what I was doing today as well. I didn't place my first trade until way later in the morning, which if you've been trading with me for a while, that is pretty much outside of the norm, right? And it's a byproduct of what the current setup shows. So some things to keep in mind for tomorrow, pretty much to keep it really simple on both ES and NQ. What we want to see is how price trades versus today's range. Hope you guys had a great session. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to shoot me a DM in the Traders Think Tank. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow morning for the pre-market prep live stream.